We are here together with Julijonas Urbonas. He is a Lithuanian artist, designer, and we are working together on Planet of People, an installation that will be presented in the Venice Architecture Biennale next year. What is Planet of People, Julijonas?
Well, simply put, actually it could be defined as an artistic and scientific feasibility study of a planet made of human bodies, as well as a thought experiment, what it would be like to make a planet of human bodies.
Why is at this moment it important to talk about Planet of People, and why this kind of installation? There is certainly a crisis of imagination, but how do you see your project itself, and what could it contribute to the discussions that are ongoing today?
Well, it could be seen from quite a few perspectives. I would say I would mention aesthetic, political, and ethical perspectives that are quite important in this project. Aesthetically, it has something to do that you have already mentioned, this kind of a crisis of imagination. And it is not something that was specifically designed for this particular crisis, but it has been my own practice that has been always aimed at pushing imagination to the extreme. And in this particular context, it's important to mention the term cosmic imagination. Imagination that is liberated from terrestrial bias. Also looking at ourselves from a perspective of an alien. And in the context of architectural biennale, I'm specifically interested in how can you change the perspective from human as the center of architecture, kind of Vitruvian architecture, to the perspective of habitat without humans, or humans without habitat. Something that could be seen as Vitruvian, kind of inverse engineering of Vitruvian architecture. Also, it has something to do with this current apocalyptical age, or eschatological age, that we've been imagining and thinking about all kinds of apocalyptical scenarios that are quite a few. You can see in all kinds of channels that we are rehearsing apocalypse in all possible ways. But when you think about survival plans, there are just very few. And within these very few, there is nothing but the escape. You know, Noah's Ark kind of ideas, colonizing our planets, setting up all kinds of habitats elsewhere, and so on. And within these scenarios, there is nothing just the replicas of human history or earthlings, habitat of earthlings, as though we have been too much earthlings. It's as though it's impossible to get rid of our earthly gravitational origins. Someone suggesting to get rid of this kind of terrestrial bias of thinking imagination and to imagine something completely different, radically different. So Planet of People is a thought experiment that would allow us to imagine something that is habitat without humans, or humans without habitat.
Good.
And when you think about ethics, you could see that we've been living in this particular time when the term Anthropocene has been established and made us aware that we cannot talk about climate change, crisis without involving space, because other planets, as well electromagnetic environment has been shaping and forming our climate. So how do we involve these topics as well as space trash into the conversations about our earthly habitat and so on and so on. So one way of looking at that is just getting rid of these grand stories of colonization, because we would trash other planets as we are trashing our planet, I think. So one way to be more responsible and think more sensitively about maybe I would say far future of human beings in space is to think about a planet made of ourselves, either metaphorically or literally.
Julijonas, you're talking about this prototype. How would that function in space itself, in Lithuanian Space Agency? How could people that watch now become in the future be part of your big experiment? How could they build this extraterrestrial celestial body, and how could they be part of another planet itself?
Okay, first and foremost, as you may have already noticed, it's quite a fictional project. Even though the scientific background is real, it probably would work, because we've been working.
How it would work? You calculated it?
So scientifically it would work, but you should know one thing, which is quite absurd. It would take around 1 trillion years to have such a biomass of human bodies in outer space with a current birth rate of our planet to make this planet. So we're so little, so tiny. So logistically, it's quite impossible. But it is quite real and feasible in terms of its being as a kind of quasi-real project. It's what I mean by that. It's scientifically, it's quite feasible in a way. On the other hand, it's quite not real because, again, of logistical issues. But what is also quite real, it is that you can put anybody in these kind of circumstances of floating in midair and imagine what it would be like to, for example, choose your own choreographical posture to monumentalize yourself for eternity. So we've been working of hybrid kind of means of communication and artistic research. So where people could be put in artistic kind of theatrical circumstances and would imagine extraterrestrially, imagine themselves being stripped of all the social, economical, political constructs that defines us as earthlings, as well as being stripped of gravitational kind of origins, and put yourself as a new being, as kind of, I would say, as a brick, as a biological brick for the extraterrestrial biological composition. Mm-hmm. One of the objects that is quite at the core of the narrative, it is a 3D scanner where you could scan yourself, and all of
a bit like in the airports that you have, like
whatever,
at the airport.
Whatever, it's up to you to decide. But what is important that you can see yourself in astrophysical simulation, and you can control with your choreographical posture what kind of planetary body could be built just by the way you involve yourself extraterrestrially, choreographically in there. So it's in a way, we are working on an empathetic link with yourself and alien yourself, the alien yourself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the other hand, we've been working on all kinds of feasibility studies, quite diverse group of thinkers, practitioners working in space or with topics in there. They've been giving all kinds of calculations, some thorough opinions and essays, articles on this particular idea. So in a way, it's kind of quasi-artistic, quasi-scientific project that allows you to put yourself in this kind of potential reality where Lithuanian Space Agency builds its own. I would say Lithuanian Space Agency kind of that would be the universe, space agency of Earth, where all human beings would be involved, and they would be sent in one of the Lagrangian points, by the way, where you would be.
Lithuanian Space Agency is maybe not about space; it's about Earth more than it's about space itself. Yeah.
But it considers the question of how such small countries that don't have technical, scientific, and other resources to catapult human bodies in outer space. But on the other hand, first of all, we have to notice that there is probably no any country now that wouldn't have any space program. So we have lots of countries that don't have its own resources to catapult bodies into outer space, but still they're working on space programs. So in this particular case, how do we kind of, I wouldn't say compete with mega countries like US and Russia, who have quite a resources. How do we think of ourselves in this so-called space culture without copying, without replicating what Americans and Russians do? Because we look into the narratives that are circulating around, they are mostly generated by Russians and Americans that have lots of historical references, mostly colonization and so on. So we as Lithuanians and other smaller countries, we forget that by replicating the ideas of colonizing other planets, we forget the mistakes of human history. And also we're not becoming also Lithuanians, we just become Americans. So in a way, we are also not so much dealing with our own identity in outer space, kind of our alien, extraterrestrial identity. So one of the aims of Lithuanian Space Agency is also to think about Lithuanian space identity, and agency as well.
So what you are telling, or what you are trying to say with about this very important comment on identity politics of today is that you with your project are announcing a new space age itself. Is that correct, or am I too ambitious in the announcement of that?
Yeah, you may say that the project taps into the questions of new kind of policies that govern space exploration and exploitation. But first of all, we have to be aware that we already live in so-called new space age, or space age 2, which has been defined by the establishment of astroeconomics, the term astro-anthropocene, as well as, probably it's my insight, increased interest from humanities and arts in the topics of space. So we've got the establishment of astro arts, for example, and astro humanities like astroanthropology, astropolitics, astroethics, and so on. So I kind of try to attune our social imagination, and particularly architectural imagination, to this new kind of space age, as well as to think about something that would go beyond this age of still age that is privatized and commercialized. So how it could be democratized in such a way that space would be open for everybody, and not only human beings, as well as non-human beings and non-living beings.
So later in the festival, Julijonas, we will also see another experiment of you, an experiment that is also part of your larger research on gravity, and therefore is also part of the ideas around Planet of People. Can you elaborate a little bit on this experiment that you made?
It is a specific kind of strategy that I've been developing for all my projects. It's almost like a meta project or backup project that is always within any project I do. It is projects that would be kind of conducted or realized without any technologies. If I always imagine, what if all of a sudden the technologies I use in my projects would become absent, they would just disappear. How I would compensate the lack of these technologies with human resources. So I thought, how actually I could, in this particular project, Planet of People, I already don't have technologies to send human beings to outer space. How I would kind of simulate or rehearse this space program with human resources. So I thought to what would take if I had around 10 bodies, 10 people, and would need to simulate Planet of People, the formation of Planet of People. So I came up with this performative strategy to simulate certain movements of the bodies that would be possible in outer space, as well as simulating the relationship, a gravitational relationship between each of the body. So in my performance, the bodies are suspended, held by other men. People are holding people, but those people who are holding, the holders, the supporters, they have to imagine themselves being as kind of weightlessness itself. It's super difficult, but after certain rehearsals, you can see that those people, usually strong men, they imagine what would happen if I move my hand this and that, what would happen if I all of a sudden become embryo. They have to, in real time, to respond to the specifics of weightlessness environment. So kind of human-based simulator of weightlessness, and specifically referring to the project Planet of People. So no technologies, then just human beings.
Okay. Julijonas, I have a last question. I would like that you tell a little bit about the collaboration with Pointer Studio. They are quite essential for the project and what they did and what they developed together with you. What did they develop, and how is that part of the installation Planet of People?
It is something that I've already mentioned, the scanner and the simulation. We've been working together to program the interface between the subject, human being, and the astrophysics simulation, the interaction between a physical being and virtual being, how a person being scanned and catapulted in astrophysics simulation could imagine him or herself in such a way that they would be kind of provoked to forget their terrestrial bias, terrestrial imagination and thinking. So we've been working with aesthetics, with interaction design, and specific software that involves hardcore astrophysics calculations and so on, as well as certain things that would allow us to forget how to say, the kind of terrestrial origins of technologies, how to make it ultimately extraterrestrial. So for example, that's why you can see in this particular sketch which is based on Brownian motion choreography. I wouldn't go deep into that, but it's kind of specific astrophysical as well as molecular choreography applied to the human bodies. And you can see that all the bodies are colorful. We don't want to have human bodies that would have certain color. So we want to have a maximum diversity of human beings. But the only thing you can see it's that we also have lots of different kind of shapes of bodies. Obese, amputees, little and big. So this is something that we've been discussing with Pointer Studio and making into hybrid narrative, interactive hybrid narrative.
Good, thank you, Julijonas. We are looking forward to see more in Venice or here in the conference where your experiment is shown, one of the feasibility studies of the Lithuanian Space Agency on gravity. Thank you very much.